Hello, and welcome to Veronica's Voice, the podcast for cycle breakers and legacy makers, where we keep it real, raw, and authentic. Hello. On today's conversation, I am joined with Americ McCullough, and I'm going to briefly introduce her before we dive into our conversation here. So Americ has 27 years of experience guiding families through the intricate journey of complex needs parenting. So today we're going to talk about what complex needs parenting is, and if you're somebody experiencing narcissistic trauma, we're also going to dive into how that may be showing up for you and you're not even aware of it. Americ work spans across diverse countries and backgrounds, revealing that parents everywhere, from Ireland to Pennsylvania, share a common desire for your children to be okay no matter the challenges. I got choked up just saying that. This universal insight fuels her mission. While parenting a child with complex needs is challenging, it does not preclude a fulfilling life. Drawing from her own personal experience with her children's diagnoses, combined with her professional expertise as a pediatric occupational therapist and parent confidence coach, Americ offers a unique and realistic parenting perspective. She is dedicated to helping parents empower themselves to live the lives they desire, regardless of the obstacles you face. Welcome, Americ.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love talking about this, supporting parents. It's just one of my passions, as you know. And so I wanted to start, Americ, by if you could share what you mean by complex needs.
Sure. So complex needs is it's a big umbrella. A lot of people will hear special needs, neurodiverse, autism. I mean, you name it. There's so many different, names out there. I like complex needs because I feel like it really encompasses everything as a parent that you actually have to deal with. Because every single problem that you have in parenting a child that has some sort of diagnosis is completely complex. There's never like, oh, I got that. There's like no easy button. Usually it's about 5 or 6 different avenues or decisions that you have to make in order to make one big decision. So I love complex because that like nails it. It totally nails the fact of that kind of parenting. But it's more of a child with a diagnosis. So, just as a side note, it's like autism or a medical diagnosis, dyslexia, those types of things.
Yeah,
Complex
thank
parenting.
you.
Yeah.
And one of the things we'll dive into maybe a little bit is how sometimes parents with narcissistic exes or maladaptive co-parents, sometimes our kids have complex needs that are not diagnosed. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you, is bringing that perspective. So people, maybe if you're a parent with a kid who doesn't have a diagnosis and you're wondering if this is relevant to you, please tune in, because I guarantee you, especially if you have a toxic ex, that it probably is relevant to you, even if your kids are not diagnosed. So, Americ, can you tell us a little bit about your kind of background, your history, your story, how this came up for you, that this has become something that you're so passionate about?
Yeah, sure. When my one son was young, he got diagnosed with dyslexia. So I kind of went through all of that, kind of figuring it out and understanding it and helping him through school and all that. And then in 2023, my one son had a cardiac arrest, playing basketball, and very traumatic. He survived, everything is good. But the trauma that ensued and all the diagnoses that happened after that. So all 3 of my kids have a cardiac diagnoses. 2 of my kids have pacemakers. And it completely like uprooted our lives. We all had to get tested. It was like a year of hell. We made it through, but I think it really shed light on my own personal journey with my parents, and I have 2 brothers, and all the things that kind of came out from that. And I really learned that I had to understand even more than just the dyslexia parenting. I had to understand how to navigate these like really complex life and death kind of decisions. And like somewhat of my background, my personal history of how I grew up really shed light as how kind of toxic my family was in this situation. And so I really started to hone in on like, who am I and how do I want to parent? Because it was getting overshadowed with the complex parenting, the medical challenges, and then my background and my personal family members. So it's been a year of a journey, and I've really come up with like a good, healthy way to kind of navigate this parenting, and that's what I teach other parents.
That's
Is
so
that
awesome. And I love what you just said about what kind of parent do I want to be?
yeah.
And I think that's awesome. And I'm not sure that, yeah, I have three young adult sons for anyone's listening who's not familiar with my story. And I'm not sure, to be honest, to be just perfectly like, vulnerable, that I've ever really asked myself that question when my kids were young. Um, I mean, certainly, yes, focused on being the best parent I could be, but asking that question of what kind of parent do I want to be, and putting it in the context of how you were raised and the kind of parenting you received or didn't receive, and making a decision to parent in a different way. Do you have sort of like a process that you walk your parents through in terms of determining, going through that, what kind of parent do you want to be?
Yes. So I love this question. So yes, I first, as a parent, when you have a child that has anything different about them, you have to go through kind of like grieving and like big emotions. So you have to understand how your emotions are driving your parenting. So you kind of have to get that out of the way. And then the next step is to figure out like, okay, I have a little bit of emotional control, because the emotions are so high. That's why I think parenting in general, doesn't matter diagnosis or not, parenting is extremely difficult, because we love our kids so much. Like the love and it's like unspoken, it's like spoken, it doesn't matter. The love is so big. And so the emotions are so raw, because when there's something wrong, if you don't have that emotional control, you completely lose your shit. Like you just, it's not, it's it. And why wouldn't you? I always say to parents, why wouldn't you? But that doesn't help you when you have all these complex problems, especially if you're divorced and you have to like co-parent. So you have to get that emotional control. And then once you have some emotional control, you can start to ask yourself these questions like, what kind of parent do I want to be? And that was always very important to me. I have no idea why. I don't know why. I was kind of blessed with like some critical thinking, but I was able to kind of take what happened in my family and kind of turn it on its head to use it for good. Like my family was really all about cooking. So I love that aspect of it, but they were not about like spending time, and they hid feelings and all that stuff. Didn't like that. So I sit down with parents and I say, what do you want? What do you want to teach your kids? Like, what do you want? Are home cooked meals great for you or not? Are sports important to you or not? Like, what qualities in yourself do you want to help bring out in your child and in your family? So I not only look at the child in question, but I look at the whole, like your kind of whole life. Like, how do you want to, like, what direction do you want to go in your life, and then kind of plan it a little bit. I have maybe like 4 or 5 core things that you really are passionate about, and we start there, and then I start to help parents figure out how to get those things, like attain them essentially.
That
So
is so empowering. I love that, to really like be very clear about what it is that you want. And I'm always looking at things through the narcissistic trauma lens, of course, because that's the world that I've lived and that I work in also. But I find that so empowering for a couple of reasons. One is that oftentimes when you have a toxic ex, you're feeling undermined, and you feel like, a lot of parents, I felt this way, and other parents that I've worked with have expressed it too, that like you feel like you don't have a lot of choice in your parenting because you're constantly being undermined. And so to just sit down and be like, no, what are the things that are in my power? What are the things that I want to teach my children? I think is just huge in that context. And And also, what is it? You said something like, what is it that you want to impart to your kids, and being really
Right.
like deliberate and intentional about that. And again, if they have a toxic parent, that parent is imparting a lot of things that you may not want your children to have. But if you can be intentional about what you are imparting to your kids, again, that just feels like so empowering to me. So that's
It is. Yeah. And
yeah,
I started thinking about this when my kids were little. So this is like not, I've been doing this for years, but I have three kids, two boys and a girl, and the first and the second are 4 years apart. So that was a big age gap. And then the second and the third, 16 months, like Irish twins. So there was a lot of like leaving out the little kid, leaving out my daughter. And so I remember feeling that. And I remember feeling left out because I have two brothers and I'm the youngest. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna see if I can fix this. Like, cause I also like to fix, right? So I looked up a book. I kept doing research and I found a book. It's called You Can't Say You Can't Play. Right. And it was by this kindergarten teacher, and she did like this whole thing. And so that became my mantra when my kids were little. I was like, you can't say you can't play. And so I forced them to play together. And if they weren't playing together and someone was left out, I would be like, how can you figure out how to play? Like, even if she's playing next to you, how can figure it out that you have to have this like creative thinking in your play. And so I really feel like any kind of thing, but that was from me. That was from what I wanted. You know what I mean? And I knew what I wanted because I felt like those feelings. I was like watching my childhood. I'm like, oh my God. Like I remember feeling left out. And so I was, aware enough. And in parent coaching and, what you do, it's making people aware. And so you actually know what you want inside you. You
right.
actually know what you want. You actually have the confidence, but you let everybody does it. Everybody lets those emotions take over, or the situation, or the acts, or because you're exhausted, right? You don't want to fight. But if you have a few clear like objectives and you're intentional in your parenting, it will be your guide.
Yeah.
You just have to stick with it, and you have to figure out what, like kind of uncover what you want.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you mentioned emotions a couple times about first really understanding your emotions and how emotions are driving parenting. And then you just highlighted again that, you may be tired or you may be in this like emotionally charged state. And so how would a parent know like if they're basically, if they're triggered or if their emotions are too big, if they're parenting from emotion rather from that space of clarity and intention?
Yeah, great question. I get this question a lot. Basically, the reaction that you're having doesn't match the situation. So I wrote a blog about why we get mad over spilt milk. Do we really get mad over like our children spilling their milk? We do not. It's never about the milk. It's always about the stressful, more, the meeting that you have to have, the fight that you just had with your parent, your child, whatever, whoever. There's always something else brewing underneath for the reaction. So if you are constantly reacting and it doesn't really warrant the reaction that you're having, that's a big sign of that you're letting your emotions get in the way of your parenting.
And do you have any suggestions for like somebody listening, maybe something that they can do to support them in those emotions in the moment?
Yeah, I mean the simplest thing, which and everybody is saying it now, but you really have to give yourself. I used to call it my mommy timeout. I like when my kids were little, I'd be like, I am so emotionally charged right now. I would just go in the bathroom. And then I would literally stay in the bathroom. I would have like a book in there. I went to the library, got a bunch of books, and I would go in the bathroom for like 20 minutes. I would just chill. But the biggest thing you can do is not react, is to take, even if you just teach yourself to take one deep breath before you say anything, you're better off than what's coming out of your mouth. And I think the breathing and just like a deep breath from your belly all the way out, all the way in just one time, I think that actually changes everything. If you can give a little bit of space between the energy of the, I know you love talking about the energy, but there is an energy in parenting, and when you're in an emotional state, your child feels that. They 100% feel it. So if you can just take a breath and kind of clear some of that energy, that really helps.
Yeah, that's awesome. This is sort of a different topic, but I was really curious. I know that you've been a pediatric occupational therapist for a long time, and I'm curious how that informs the work that you do now in this parent confidence coaching.
Yes, love this question. It's perfect because what I've found for myself is you have to actually know yourself and your sensory problems. Because if you're not taking care of yourself, there's like a whole thing of sensory, sight, touch, taste, like proprioceptive, like gross motor, kind of like if you don't know exactly what calms you down, what revs you up, what gets you, to a level, like I drink coffee every morning. If you talk to me before my coffee, you're probably not going to get a nice Americ. Like you know what I mean? I don't want to talk to you. I just want my cup of coffee and I want to sit. Every adult does those kinds of things. They have some sort of strategies that keeps them in a sensory alignment, a just right place throughout the day so they don't lose it. So, and kids do the same thing, but they just don't have all of those techniques yet. So I actually go through and teach people what their techniques are, what their sensory issues. We take a sensory profile and we go through it, and then we're like, okay, now let's do one on your kid. And so then you can start to understand, oh, your kid does the same thing, or oh, your kid's completely opposite. And that just gives you more information to help you parent the child that you have, and to help yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed and upset or whatever, and you don't have that emotional control.
That's fantastic. I love that tool. I actually personally haven't heard of that specific tool before. It sounds like it's probably really common in your background in occupational therapy. And I could see how that would be not especially, but in my experience, I could see it being useful for like somebody who's on the autism spectrum or,
Yeah,
yeah. And I have a kid one of my three boys who really gets overloaded with sensory overload and really needs time to decompress. And I also think that's common for, again, when children have like a narcissistic parent, if kids are going to, if you have shared custody and a kid is going to the other parent's house, when they're at that parent's house, that parent is not a good parent just by definition. They can't be. So by the
right.
way, if you're out there and you have a toxic ex and you think that ex is only toxic to you, um, they are
Right. Yeah.
also creating challenges for your children. And what we have found, what's pretty commonplace knowledge, I think, is when they come home from that other parent's house or come to your house after being at the other parent's house, there's a lot of like sensory overload.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
transition day is always about like decompression. And this
Right.
tool that you're mentioning about understanding, what did you call it? Your own
Sensory profile.
sensory profile. So understanding your sensory profile as a parent and then understanding your kid's sensory profile so that you can learn to regulate yourself through that
Yes.
sensory profile
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
support your kid in regulating. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. It's really important to understand how to regulate yourself. Because you also narcissism, you don't want to take on the energy of that your child has now. They have to learn how to let go of that energy themselves. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like it's just the facts, right? Like, so I'm always doing that. I'm like, let me take it on. And then I'm like, oh, I gotta stop, So like teaching your child how to do that. And this goes like this energy is out there. Like it's not just for, kids with, parents that are narcissists. It's like autism. It's actually though, what I've found, it's everyone. If
Yes.
you can understand how to self-regulate, you're halfway there. You know
Or
what I
more
mean?
than.
Yeah, exactly. You're more than that because then once you're regulated and you're calm, you're parenting from that place.
That's
You're not
right.
parenting from this like anxious place. So
Yes.
I've really found that I think a lot of coaches talk about like self-care and things like that. And they're like, do yoga and stuff like that. But that might not be your thing. You actually might have to go for a run,
Yeah.
like but you don't know that. Like you have to, so that's what I love about like kind of pairing occupational therapy with parent coaching, is because I know all these techniques because I've used them and they
Yeah.
totally work, and they work on kids. So why wouldn't they work on adults?
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah, so
fantastic.
yeah,
And
that's a great point.
yeah, and you're talking about emotional regulation and sort of parenting from a place of, feeling anxious. And I remember for me, post-divorce, especially in early post-divorce, having so much anxiety around parenting my children. One of my kids really struggled with severe depression right after the divorce, and I just felt out of my depth at that time. Um, and so I'm curious, like if a lot of parents that you work with, if anxiety is something that comes up a lot in your work.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always a certain level of anxiety that you have, first of all, as a parent. But second of all, I think with any complex problems that you have with your kid, it just becomes kind of this like I don't know, this level that you have that usually probably won't ever go away, right? Because you don't know, especially if you have a child with some sort of medical issue, where the disease is progressive or something like that. Because I mean, how could the anxiety go away? So what I teach people is anxiety is here to stay, but you do not have to sit in it. There's so many ways that you can manage that anxiety and somewhat resolve a lot of it, because anxiety is a lot in our heads, right? It's like totally, we're making everything so much worse because of our past, because of what happened to our children, because of whatever trauma we had. We build the anxiety up and it becomes like a monster. And then it just gets out of control and you're spiraling and spiraling. And then, you're never going to parent from a place, and you're never going to feel like your life is going to be good. So you do have to get some, control over it, understand it, and then start to work through it and resolve it. Some anxiety is good, right? Like you need to know when your kids are having problems. You need to know if there's a problem with your ex-husband. You know what I mean? Like it can be a useful tool, but when it overshadows everything in your life, it is no longer useful. It is
Right.
completely useless. So
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point. It's something that I talk to about emotions as indicators versus emotions as triggers. And
yeah.
all of them, like anger, guilt, a lot of the emotions that we sort of perceive as a negative, they're there to give us information. If you're
Mhm.
angry about something, it's usually because it's something that's not, it's a protective response, right? There's something out there that's not good for you. And anxiety is the same way. It's alerting you to something. But when you're
Yeah.
sitting in it constantly, then your whole nervous system gets shot, and we're back to the emotional regulation and really nervous system regulation is what it comes
Yeah.
down to.
But that's exactly what it comes down to. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a tough one. Anxiety's tough. I see it all the time. Everybody, I'm on lots of groups, for parents and stuff. And a lot of people are just anxious or they fear the future. I would
Yes.
say that's one of the biggest things that people, but you can't even really get into the future thinking until you kind of resolve these other things, because that anxiety just, it feeds into the fear of the future. So
Absolutely.
something miraculous kind of happens once you start to work on your emotional regulation and understanding your emotions and getting some techniques, and then that builds your confidence up as a parent. You find your confidence, and then what happens is you don't actually fear the future as much as you thought you did, because you've resolved a lot of the other problems that led to the future fearing. So I think that's what I do. Those are the three things, the three steps that I do help parents with. We get emotional control, deal with big emotions, we work on your confidence, and then we deal with the fear of your future. So
That's
that's my
awesome. Yeah, that I can see how that would be so transformative. I wish I had something like that when my kids were younger, because it'd be really supportive. And you have a class that you or a program that you people can learn this
Yeah.
process through. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. It's a 10-week course. And it's exactly what I was just saying. We take the first 3 weeks and we talk about emotional control and understanding your thoughts, your feelings, because you have to get that out of the way. If you don't have that, you can't have the confidence and the fear, lack of fear of future. So yeah, I have a 10-week course. It's on my website, conquerparenting.com. You can check it out and see if it would be right for you. It's a group coaching and it's 1 hour sessions.
For 10
And
weeks.
there's a workbook. So at the end, you totally get like a blueprint for, what kind of parent you want to be, who you are, who your child is. Like it takes you through the whole, like everything that I always wanted. Like when I was going through my 2023 kind of crisis, I was like, I am building exactly what I wanted, like what would have helped me. So it's super fun. And yeah, it's not like sad, like I was like a sad sack mom, for over a year. And I just want to help parents not be like that, because I know we all have to go through it and it takes time to process stuff and we have to grieve and all that stuff. But I think it's your kid's still there, right? Like you still have to get up every day and you have to make French toast. Like you got to do what you got to
Right?
do.
You can't like put your kids on pause. You're like, just stay over here while I go process my emotions. I'll be back in a year
Right.
and you'll be the same age. We'll pick things back up.
Yeah. So I think the sooner you recognize you need help and kind of like a guide, the better off that you'll feel, the better off that your kids will be, the better off that your life will be. So
100%. So we
yeah.
have your website down below in the notes. So if you're listening and you're interested in that 10-week course, check out the notes. I think you said it's conquerparenting.com. Is that right?
Yeah. Conquer parent.
Conquerparenting.com, but we'll have that link for you. And then in the meantime, Americ, you also have a free gift for people that they can get access to right away, because the 10-week course is going to depend on when that next opening is, but you also have a free gift that they can dive into right now.
I do. Yeah. So I also put together a free gift based off of my experience of what happened with my son. And that is also on my website. It's like 3 ways to transform your anxiety, because that was the biggest problem that I had. I was really stuck in that anxiety loop and just constantly feared. So I just gave a little free gift, a little understanding, just a little taste of kind of what my course is about a little bit, but it's mostly just talking about 3 ways to transform that anxiety.
Beautiful. Well, I know anxiety is such a big issue for so many people and especially parents. So we have that link as well if you want to grab that free mastermind and learn 3 ways to manage your anxiety, and then check out Americ's course on her website, her 10-week course. And so Americ, any final words or thoughts for our listeners?
Just act, because I think if you don't get help as a parent, your kids grow up really fast. And I know everybody tells you that, but it is the God honest truth. Like before you know it. And what happens when you have some problems with your parenting, it spirals out of control. And then it really affects your kids. So get help now. Get a blueprint for success, and your life is going to be so much better and you'll have a lot less anxiety.
And your kids' life is going to be so much better.
Yeah. Yeah,
And their
especially.
future. And their future.
Yeah, future generations. And
Yeah.
that's what I've done with my family. I've kind of changed everything. And so my kids did not grow up how I grew up. So
That's
um
fantastic. Breaking the cycle.
yes, I did. I broke the cycle. It just takes one. Just takes one.
That's right. Breaking the cycle is hard work. So congratulations on that. And thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Veronica's Voice. If you took something away from today's episode, remember to like, share, and subscribe so others can benefit as well. See you next time.